In the shadowed heart of St. Paul's Cloister, where ancient stones whisper secrets, a scream shatters the midnight silence. Abbot Gregory Hawthorne lies dead, his face frozen in terror, a shattered vial of poison in his hand. Was it suicide or a sinister hand at work? Whispers of a fatal secret, a cursed reliquary, a scandalous past, or a betrayal centuries old, haunt the fog-draped halls. Who among the pious brethren harbors a killer's heart? Chapter 1. The Shadow in the Cloister. The mist draped itself over St. Paul's Cloister, like a mourner's veil, softening the jagged outlines of its Norman spires against the bruised sky of an autumn night in 1935. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and decaying leaves, a chill seeping through the ancient walls, as if the ghosts of medieval monks still whispered their vespers. The cloister, nestled in the remote folds of the English countryside, stood as a bastion of solitude, its silence broken only by the rhythmic toll of a distant bell, marking the witching hour. Within its hallowed precincts, the brethren of this Benedictine order lived in disciplined reverence, their days governed by prayer, study, and the preservation of sacred relics. Yet tonight, an unspoken dread hung over the sacred grounds, as though the very stones sensed an impending rupture in their sanctity. Brother Elias, the cloister's archivist, shuffled through the darkened corridors, his lantern casting flickering shadows across the worn flagstones. A stooped figure in his 60s, with a face etched by years of poring over illuminated manuscripts, Elias was a man of habit, his nights often spent cataloguing the cloister's vast library. His sandaled feet made soft scuffs against the stone as he approached the scriptorium, a vaulted chamber where the air was thick with the musty aroma of vellum and ink. The heavy oak door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing rows of towering shelves, their contents glowing faintly in the lantern's glow. Tomes of theology, chronicles of saints, and secrets locked in forgotten scripts. Elias's breath caught as his light wrist. Cold. Lifeless. A cry tore from his throat, raw and piercing, echoing through the cloister's halls and rousing the brethren from their cells. The monks gathered swiftly, their black robes swishing like shadows as they crowded the scriptorium's threshold. Prior Thomas, second in command, pushed through, his gaunt face pale under his tonsure. "Merciful God!" he whispered, crossing himself as he beheld the abbot. Sister Agnes, the cloister's nurse and sole female resident, hovered at the edge, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting nervously. Father Lucian, the ambitious sub-prior, stood rigid, his sharp features betraying a flicker of something, grief, or perhaps calculation. Brother Simon, a reclusive former soldier with a scarred visage, lingered at the back, his gaze fixed on the floor, as if unwilling to meet the abbot's frozen stare. Whispers of a fatal secret had circulated among the brethren for weeks, though none dared speak openly. Some spoke of a hidden treasure, a reliquary rumored to contain a fragment of the true cross, priceless to collectors and sacred to the faithful. Others hinted at darker possibilities, forbidden liaisons from the abbot's past, a curse tied to the cloister's founding in the 12th century, or documents that could unravel the order's very existence. Abbot Gregory, a scholar of repute before taking vows, had guarded these secrets with a zeal bordering on obsession. His youth as Gregory Hawthorne Esquire was rumored to have been marked by scandal, a lost inheritance, a jilted lover, perhaps even a duel. Had one of these shadows returned to claim him? Prior Thomas knelt beside the body, murmuring a prayer, but his voice trembled. Poison, he said, pointing to the vial. It smells of cyanide. Sister Agnes gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But who would do such a thing? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Father Lucien's eyes narrowed. Or what? He muttered, glancing toward the darkened windows where the mist pressed close. Brother Simon remained silent, his scarred hands twitching at his text illuminated in crimson and gold. The words seemed to pulse in the lantern light. Et umbrae peccatorum revelabuntur, and the shadows of sinners shall be revealed. Her fingers brushed the page, then withdrew as if burned. Outside, the mist thickened, curling around the cloister like a living thing. A shadow moved in the garden, fleeting and formless, vanishing into the night. Footsteps echoed faintly, then faded, leaving only the whisper of leaves and the weight of unspoken truths. The cloister, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb, its walls closing in with secrets that could no longer be contained. Word of the tragedy would soon reach beyond these walls. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, known for his pragmatic approach to crime, would arrive by dawn, bringing with him a certain Belgian detective whose reputation for unraveling the impossible preceded him. Hercule Poirot, with his fastidious mustache and relentless grey cells, would find in St. Paul's Cloister a puzzle unlike any other, a tapestry of faith, greed, and betrayal, woven through centuries and stained with blood. For now the brethren stood in uneasy vigil, each guarding their own truths, as the fog whispered of revelations yet to come. Chapter 2. The Arrival of the Little Belgian. The taxi rattled along the rutted lanes of the English countryside, its wheels kicking up clouds of dust that mingled with the lingering mist of dawn. It was October 1935, and the rolling hills, cloaked in autumn's somber hues, stretched toward the horizon under a sky heavy with leaden clouds. Hercule Poirot sat erect in the back seat, his gloved hands folded neatly over his ebony cane, his mustache impeccably waxed despite the early hour, his sharp eyes gleaming with the curiosity of a mind that thrived on enigma, surveyed the landscape as it unfolded toward St. Paul's Cloister. The call had come urgently from Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, roused from his London office by a wire from the local constabulary. "A queer business, Poirot," Japp had said over the crackling line. "Full of monkish intrigue and a dead abbot, those of a man who had seen too much, yet revealed little." "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low and measured, "we are grateful for your presence. This tragedy has shaken our order." His hands clasped tightly, betraying a tremor. Poirot inclined his head, his gaze already scanning the surroundings, the cloister garden, its paths winding through neat herb beds, the towering bell that loomed in the mist, the faint sound of chanting from within, a mournful counterpoint to the morning's grim purpose. The prior led Poirot through a vaulted corridor, its walls adorned with faded tapestries depicting martyrdoms and miracles. The air grew colder as they approached the abbot's chamber, a modest room adjacent to the scriptorium where the body had been found. "An accident, perhaps," Prior Thomas ventured, his tone hopeful but unconvincing. The abbot was unwell of late. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "No, monsieur. The little grey cells, they do not accept accidents so readily when poison is involved." The chamber was austere, befitting a man of vows, yet rich in scholarly trappings. A heavy oak desk bore stacks of papers, a quill and an inkpot. A single candelabrum cast long shadows across a crucifix on the wall. The scriptorium, visible through an open archway, was a labyrinth of shelves, manuscripts glowing like jewels in the dim light. Poirot's attention fixed on the desk where Abbot Gregory Hawthorne had met his end. The body had been moved, but Japp, arriving shortly after Poirot, gestured to a chalk outline on the floor. "Found just there," he said, scratching his chin. "Cyanide, the local doc says. Nasty stuff. Vial in his hand, no prints but his own." Poirot knelt, his monocle glinting as he examined the scene. The shattered vial, now in an evidence bag, reeked of bitter almonds. A half-burned letter in the grate caught his eye, its edges curled black, fragments of words visible. "Your shame. Payment. Revealed." Blackmail, then, but of what? The abbot's past was a tapestry of rumours. Gregory Hawthorne, Esquire, a man of wealth and scandal before his vows, rumoured to have fled a duel, succeeding the abbot. "A bit too eager, if you ask me," Japp muttered. Brother Simon, a scarred ex-soldier, harboured a grudge against the abbot for denying him absolution over wartime sins. "A dark horse, that one," Japp added. Poirot's interviews began in the chapter house, its vaulted ceiling echoing with the weight of history. Brother Elias fidgeted, his fingers ink-stained, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "I was cataloguing manuscripts," he insisted. "I saw nothing, heard nothing until I found him." His voice broke, but Poirot noted the sweat on his brow. Sister Agnes spoke softly, her habit framing a pale face. "The abbot was troubled," she said. "He spoke of a letter, a burden from his past. I gave him only his medicine, nothing more." Her hands twisted her rosary, beads clicking like a metronome of anxiety. Father Lucian was polished, his words measured but his ambition bare. "The abbot was a great man," he said, "but perhaps too secretive. The reliquary's contents, he guarded them jealously." Brother Simon, sullen and withdrawn, muttered, "He judged me, refused me peace. But I didn't kill him." Clues emerged like pieces of a shattered mosaic. The cyanide, Japp confirmed, was medical grade, accessible from the infirmary where Agnes worked. A chalice from Vespers bore traces of the same poison, though unused. The half-burned letter suggested a blackmailer among the brethren, but who? Poirot's method was meticulous. Observe the demeanor, question the inconsistencies. Let the grey cells arrange the facts. "The mind, it is like a garden," he told Japp over tea in the refectory, the scent of chamomile mingling with the ever-present incense. "One must prune the weeds to see the truth." As evening fell, the cloister's bell tolled, its resonance vibrating through the stones. Poirot strolled the garden, his cane tapping rhythmically, when a shadow flitted across the path, a figure cloaked, vanishing into the mist. Footsteps crunched, then faded. Poirot's pulse quickened, not from fear but from
rumors. "A ghost, some say, haunts these grounds. A heretic burned here centuries ago." Poirot waved a dismissive hand. "Ghosts do not poison, monsieur. Men do." Yet the prior's unease was palpable, his eyes darting to the darkened corners. As Poirot retired to his guest cell, a note slipped under his door, scrawled in haste, "Beware the cloister's secrets." The handwriting was unfamiliar, the ink still wet. Outside, the wind howled, and the bell tolled once more, as if summoning the truth from the shadows. Chapter 3. Whispers of the Past. The refectory of St. Paul's Cloister was a cavernous hall, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows cast by flickering sconces. The long oak table, worn smooth by centuries of silent meals, bore the faint scent of bread and wax, mingling with the ever-present incense that permeated the cloister's air. It was the morning after Hercule Poirot's arrival in October 1935, and the mist outside clung to the leaded windows, diffusing the weak sunlight into a ghostly glow. The brethren sat in uneasy silence, their black robes stark against the stone walls, as Poirot paced before them, his polished shoes clicking with measured precision. His eyes, sharp as a falcon's, darted from face to face, reading the unspoken tensions that hung like cobwebs among the monks. The death of Abbot Gregory Hawthorne had fractured the cloister's sanctity, and Poirot sensed that the truth lay buried in the past, both the abbot's and the cloister's own. Brother Elias, the archivist who had discovered the body, sat at the table's end, his ink-stained fingers fidgeting with a rosary. His face, lined and pale, betrayed a nervous energy, as if the weight of his discovery pressed upon him still. "Monsieur Elias," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding, "you knew the abbot well, n'est-ce pas? A scholar, a man of secrets, perhaps?" Elias's eyes flickered, meeting Poirot's briefly before dropping. "He was devout," he stammered, "but troubled. He spoke of atonement, of shadows from his life before the cloister." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And what shadows precisely did he—"
The true cross. Its ornate gold chest, locked in the crypt, was a treasure of incalculable worth, both spiritual and material. Father Lucien, the sub-prior, had petitioned repeatedly to study its contents, his scholarly ambition thinly veiling a hunger for power. The abbot was possessive, Lucien said, his sharp features taut as he faced Poirot in the chapter house. He denied me access, claiming it was for the order's safety. His tone carried a trace of resentment, and Poirot marked him as a man whose ambition might outstrip his vows. Lucien's alibi for the night of the murder was flimsy. Prayer in the chapel, unwitnessed, his absence from vespers noted by the sacristan. A red herring surfaced, a missing key to the reliquary, last seen in the abbot's possession. Lucien suggested theft as a motive, his eyes glinting with something Poirot could not yet name. Greed or deflection? "The key vanished the night he died," Lucien said. "Someone wanted what lies within." Poirot's mind whirred. Was the reliquary the heart of the mystery, or a distraction from a deeper truth? Sister Agnes, the cloister's nurse, was next, her pale hands trembling as she spoke in the infirmary, surrounded by shelves of vials and herbs. "The abbot suffered heart palpitations," she said, her voice soft but unsteady. "I prepared his tonics, but I swear they were pure." Poirot observed her closely, noting the flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes darted to the floor. "And yet, mademoiselle, cyanide was found in his system. From your infirmary, perhaps?" Agnes gasped, her rosary slipping from her fingers. I would never." But her agitation suggested more, a secret, perhaps, tied to the abbot's whispered confessions to her of a fatal letter from his past, hinting at blackmail over an illegitimate child. Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was relentless. Was Agnes protecting herself or another? Clues mounted like stones in a cairn. The chalice used at vespers, found in the sacristy, bore traces of cyanide, though if revenge had driven him to murder. Yet Simon's movements the night of the abbot's death were unaccounted for, his cell empty during the midnight office. As evening descended, the cloister's bell tolled, its mournful note swallowed by the thickening fog. Poirot returned to the scriptorium, where the abbot's desk still bore the weight of his final moments. Among the manuscripts, he found a ledger detailing the cloister's finances, donations dwindling, expenses mounting. A coded note in the abbot's hand hinted at smuggling during the war, relics sold to fund the order's survival. Was this the fatal secret that cost him his life? Poirot's fingers brushed the open manuscript, its Latin text glowing in the candlelight. Et umbrae peccatorum revelabuntur. And the shadows of sinners shall be revealed. The words seemed to pulse, a warning or a prophecy. Suddenly, a scream shattered the silence, echoing from the library across the cloister.
Poirot and Japp rushed through the corridors, their footsteps pounding against the flagstones. They found Brother Elias crumpled on the floor, blood trickling from a gash on his temple, a torn page from an ancient tome clutched in his hand. "The secret. It's revealed," he gasped before fainting, his words hanging like a spectre in the air. The page, written in medieval Latin, spoke of a curse tied to the reliquary, a warning against those who would betray its sanctity. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Was this another red herring, or had Elias stumbled upon the truth? The library was a maze of shelves, its air thick with dust and secrets. Footprints in the dust suggested a struggle, but they led nowhere, vanishing at the threshold. Japp scratched his head. "Blasted monks and their mysteries," he muttered. Poirot, undeterred, examined the torn page. Its edges were fresh, the tear deliberate. "This was no accident," he said softly. "Someone wished Elias silenced, or wished to make it appear so." The assailant, he deduced, was still among them, hiding behind a mask of piety. As the brethren gathered to tend Elias, Poirot observed their faces. Lucien's calculated calm, Agnes's trembling hands, Simon's avert existence. As the bell tolled midnight, Poirot felt the weight of the mystery settle upon him, a puzzle as intricate as the manuscripts that lined the scriptorium. The truth, he knew, lay in the shadows of the past, waiting to be uncovered by the relentless logic of his grey cells. But as he retired to his cell, a creak in the corridor made him pause. Someone was watching, waiting, and the game was far from over. Chapter 4. The Enigmatic Reliquary. The crypt of St. Paul's Cloister was a realm of shadows, its low vaulted ceiling pressing down like the weight of centuries. The air was damp and cold, heavy with the scent of earth and ancient stone. As Hercule Poirot descended the narrow spiral staircase, his cane tapping rhythmically against the worn steps. It was the second day of his investigation, in October 1935, and the mist outside still clung to the cloister's walls, shrouding the Norman spires in an ethereal veil. The crypt, illuminated by a single lantern held by Prior Thomas, housed the reliquary, a golden chest adorned with intricate filigree and precious stones, said to contain a fragment of the true cross. Its lock gleamed unmarred, but the abbot's key, last seen in his possession, was missing. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the relic, his mind whirring with the possibilities of greed, betrayal, and murder that swirled around it like the fog outside. The reliquary was the cloister's heart, both spiritually and, perhaps, criminally. Abbot Gregory Hawthorne, found dead in the scriptorium with a shattered vial of cyanide, had guarded it with a zeal bordering on obsession. Rumours among the brethren whispered of its value, not just to the faithful, but to collectors who would pay fortunes for a sacred artifact. Poirot knelt before the chest, his gloved fingers tracing its ornate surface. "This reliquary," he mused aloud. "It is a motive most compelling, n'est-ce pas? But is it the treasure itself, or what it conceals, that drove a man to kill?" Prior Thomas, his gaunt face pale in the lampstone. "The abbot denied me, claiming it was too sacred for scrutiny. He hoarded knowledge like a miser." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And you, Monsieur Lucien, did you not covet the abbot's position, which would grant you access to this treasure?" Lucien's jaw tightened. "I serve the order, not my own desires." But his alibi for the night of the murder, prayer in the chapel, unwitnessed, remained fragile, and Poirot marked him as a man whose ambition might have turned deadly. A red herring emerged in the cloister garden, where Poirot found a footprint in the mud near the scriptorium's outer wall. It matched Brother Elias's boots, suggesting he had been outside the night of the murder, despite his claim of cataloguing manuscripts indoors. Elias, when confronted in the library, grew pale, his ink-stained hands trembling. "I swear, I was not there," he protested. "Someone must have taken my boots." Poirot's eyes narrowed. A planted clue, perhaps, to divert suspicion. Elias's access to the scriptorium made him a plausible suspect, but his nervous demeanor suggested fear rather than guilt. Or was it a performance? Sister Agnes, the cloister's nurse, provided a new thread in the infirmary, where shelves of vials and herbs lined the walls. Her hands shook as she recounted a private confession from the abbot. "He spoke of a letter," she whispered, her eyes darting to the door. "A fatal letter from his past, threatening to expose an illegitimate child. He was tormented, Monsieur Poirot." Her voice broke, and Poirot noted the flush in her cheeks. Was she protecting the abbot's memory, or hiding her own involvement? The cyanide, traced to the infirmary, was under her care, yet she swore it had been untouched. "I would never harm him," she insisted. But her trembling betrayed a deeper secret. Perhaps an affair, or complicity in a darker scheme. Progressive revelations came as Poirot returned to the abbot's chamber, where a hidden compartment in the desk yielded a trove of coded notes. They detailed wartime smuggling, relics sold to fund the cloister's survival during the Great War, when donations had dwindled. The abbot, then a younger
Figure, cloaked, fleeting, vanished into the fog, leaving only the echo of footsteps. Poirot bent, finding a scrap of cloth caught on a thorn, its weave matching the monk's robes. "A clue or another deception?" he murmured. The garden, with its neat herb beds and stone paths, seemed to whisper secrets, its shadows alive with possibility. Back in the scriptorium, Poirot examined the open manuscript from the night of the murder, its Latin text glowing in the candlelight. "Et umbrae peccatorum revelabuntur," and the shadows of sinners shall be revealed. The words felt like a taunt, a challenge to his deductive powers. He turned to the reliquary's lore, piecing together whispers from the brethren. Some believed it held not just a relic, but documents, proof of the cloister's founding on stolen land, a scandal that could dissolve the order if exposed. Had the abbot died to protect this truth, or to conceal his own role in its perpetuation? Brother Simon, the scarred ex-soldier, emerged as a shadow in the investigation. In the refectory, his sullen silence contrasted with the other's nervous chatter. "The abbot judged me," he growled when pressed by Poirot. "Denied me absolution for what I did in the war. Called my soul damned." His scarred hands clenched, and Poirot wondered if revenge had driven him to poison. Simon's movements the night of the murder were unaccounted for, his cell empty during the midnight office. Yet his grief seemed genuine, his eyes haunted by more than guilt. As night deepened, the cloister's bell tolled, its mournful note reverberating through the stones. Poirot retired to his guest cell, his mind a whirl of clues and contradictions. The reliquary's missing key, the forged letter, the cyanide's source, all pointed to a calculated murder, but the motive remained elusive. Greed? Revenge? Or a deeper conspiracy, woven into the cloister's very foundations? As he lit a candle, a note slipped under his door, scrawled in trembling script. "Beware the cloister's ghost." The ink was fresh, the warning urgent. Poirot's pulse quickened, not for sharp, with the scent of frost and rosemary from the cloister garden, where dew glistened on the neatly trimmed hedges. It was the third day of Hercule Poirot's investigation in October 1935, and the weight of Abbot Gregory Hawthorne's murder pressed heavily upon the brethren. The cloister, Once a sanctuary of prayer and reflection, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, its corridors echoing with unspoken accusations. Poirot stood in the chapter house, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the sombre robes of the monks gathered before him. His grey cells, ever restless, sifted through the clues. The cyanide vial, the half-burned blackmail letter, the missing reliquary key, and the attack on Brother Elias, who had clutched a cryptic page warning of a curse. Each thread pointed to a killer among them, but the motive remained as elusive as the morning fog. Poirot's gaze swept over the suspects, their faces etched with tension. Brother Elias, the archivist, sat with his hands folded tightly, his eyes darting nervously as if expecting another assault. Sister Agnes, the nurse, stood near the door, her pale face framed by her habit, her fingers twisting her rosary with a rhythm that betrayed her unease. Father Lucien, the ambitious sub-prior, maintained a composed facade, but his sharp eyes flickered with calculation. And Brother Simon, the scarred ex-soldier, lingered at the edges, his sullen silence a storm cloud in the room. Poirot's moustache twitched as he addressed them. "Mes amis, the truth, it hides in the shadows of your silence, but Hercule Poirot, he will bring it to the light." The investigation deepened with a focus on Brother Simon, whose grudge against the abbot was palpable. In a private interview in the cloister's sacristy, surrounded by silver chalices and embroidered vestments, Simon's voice was rough as gravel. "The abbot refused me absolution," he said, his scarred hands clenching, "called my wartime deeds, killing to survive, unforgivable. He judged me, a man who fought for king and country." His eyes, haunted by memories of trenches and bloodshed, met. "Someone stirring the pot, Poirot, trying to spook us off the scent." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément. The ghost is a distraction, but from what?" Clues accumulated like stones in a cairn. The cyanide, traced to the infirmary under Sister Agnes's care, was a damning link. In the infirmary, surrounded by shelves of tinctures and bandages, Agnes wept as Poirot questioned her. "I took a vial once," she confessed, her voice breaking, "for a dying monk to ease his pain. Mercy, not murder." Her tears seemed genuine, but Poirot noted her flushed cheeks, her trembling hands. Was she a compassionate nurse, or a woman hiding a darker truth? Her claim of administering only heart tonics to the abbot was undermined by the cyanide's presence in the infirmary, accessible to her skilled hands. Brother Elias's role grew murkier. His nervous demeanor, coupled with his discovery of the body, made him a focal point. In the library, where dust motes danced in the slanted light, Poirot pressed him. "You argued with the abbot hours before his death, did you not?" Elias paled, his ink-stained fingers clutching a manuscript. "It was about the reliquary," he stammered. "I urged him to share its secrets with the order, but he refused." Witnesses among the brethren confirmed the heated exchange, heard from the scriptorium's antechamber. Elias's access to the murder scene, combined with a footprint in the garden matching his boots, painted a suspicious picture. Yet his claim of stolen boots rang plausible, too plausible perhaps, for a killer crafting an alibi. Poirot's logical process was relentless, his grey cells arranging the facts like pieces of a mosaic. The half-burned letter, with its fragments of "your shame" payment, suggested blackmail tied to the abbot's past, an illegitimate child perhaps, as Agnes had hinted. But another clue emerged, a trace of cyanide in the abbot's pipe tobacco, found in a tin on his desk. Poirot deduced the poison's delivery. Not the chalice, not the tea, but the tobacco, inhaled during the abbot's evening meditation. Despair.
The scene was chilling. Simon's boots scuffed the floor, but no chair lay toppled beneath him, suggesting he had been hoisted. The note's ink was fresh, its handwriting unfamiliar. Poirot's mind raced. Simon, with his grudge and missing alibi, had been a threat. Perhaps he knew too much. But what? The reliquary's secrets? The abbot's smuggling? Or something deeper, tied to the cloister's very foundations? The brethren gathered below, their faces pale with shock. Lucian's composure wavered, his eyes darting to the shadows. Agnes clutched her rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Elias, still bandaged from his attack, stared blankly, as if seeing ghosts. Poirot returned to the scriptorium, where the open manuscript still lay, its Latin text glowing. Et umbrae peccatorum revelabuntur, and the shadows of sinners shall be revealed. The words felt like a taunt, a challenge to his deductive powers. He sifted through the abbot's papers, finding a ledger hinting at financial strain, donations dwindling, the cloister teetering on ruin. A coded note mentioned the child's inheritance, linking back to Agnes's story. Was it true, or a fabrication to divert suspicion? Poirot's gray cells hummed, piecing together the threads. The cyanide's source, the blackmail letter, Simon's murder. The killer was close, hiding behind a mask of piety. As night fell, the cloister's bell tolled, its mournful note echoing through the stones. Poirot stood in the garden, the mist curling around him like a living thing. A rustle in the bushes drew his attention, but when he approached, he found only a broken twig and a faint footprint, smaller than before, perhaps a woman's. The web tightens, he murmured, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. But as he turned back to the cloister, a whisper carried on the wind. The truth is cursed. Was it a trick or a warning from the killer? The shadows of suspicion deepened, and Poirot knew the next revelation would bring him closer to the heart of the mystery. Or over the brethren, and Poirot's grey cells hummed with the urgency of a puzzle growing ever more intricate. The scriptorium, where the abbot had met his end, was a labyrinth of knowledge and shadows. The open manuscript on the desk still bore its haunting Latin inscription, Et umbrae peccatorum revelabuntur, and the shadows of sinners shall be revealed. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the room, noting the undisturbed shelves, the quill still tipped in its inkpot, and the faint scorch marks in the grate where a blackmail letter had been half burned. The clues were mounting. The cyanide vial, traced to the infirmary, the missing reliquary key, the coded notes hinting at wartime smuggling. And now Simon's staged suicide, his note proclaiming, "The secret dies with me." Poirot's moustache twitched as he murmured, "Non, mon ami. The secret lives, and it will speak through Hercule Poirot." Among the abbot's papers, Poirot uncovered a trove of hidden correspondence, letters from a London solicitor, sealed with crimson wax, detailing a will that bequeathed the reliquary's contents to a mysterious beneficiary. The name was obscured, the ink smudged, but a phrase stood out. "To the rightful heir, in atonement for my sins." Poirot's mind raced. Was this heir the illegitimate child Sister Agnes had mentioned, or a fiction to mask another motive? The letters hinted at the abbot's past as Gregory Hawthorne, Esquire, a man of wealth and scandal, whose fall from grace had driven him to the cloister. A duel, a jilted lover, a lost inheritance. These were the shadows that clung to him, and one had proven fatal. Father Lucian, the ambitious sub-prior, entered the scriptorium, his robes swishing softly. His sharp features paled as he glimpsed the letters in Poirot's hands.
"Those are private," he said, his voice tight. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Lucien, nothing is private in murder. You knew of the abbot's will, did you not? And your own claim to his family, perhaps?" Lucian's composure faltered, his jaw clenching. "My mother was a hawthorn," he admitted.
Tampering with the abbot's tea service the evening of the death, a detail that shifted suspicion back to the sub-prior. Sister Agnes, summoned to the infirmary, provided another thread in the tangled web. Her pale face was drawn, her eyes red from tears or sleeplessness. "I forged a prescription once," she confessed, her voice barely audible, "for the abbot's heart tonic, to calm him. He was so troubled by that letter." Her admission painted her as a conspirator, perhaps, but her trembling suggested psychological torment rather than cold calculation. Poirot noted her flushed cheeks, her hands clutching her rosary. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "what else did the abbot confide?" "The truth. It is your salvation." Agnes shook her head, tears spilling. "Only that his past would destroy us all." Progressive revelations clarified the murder's method. Poirot deduced that the cyanide had been administered not through the chalice or tea, but via the abbot's pipe tobacco, a habit he indulged during evening meditation. The tin on his desk, overlooked by the local police, bore traces of the poison, cleverly mixed to ensure inhalation. The killer required intimate knowledge of the abbot's routines, knowledge shared by few. Lucian, with his frequent visits to the abbot's chamber, was a prime suspect. But Elias's access to the scriptorium and Agnes's control of the infirmary kept them in the frame. The cloister's atmosphere grew oppressive as night fell, the mist outside thickening into a shroud that seemed to pulse with secrets. Poirot paced the cloister garden, his cane sinking into the damp earth, when a sudden power outage plunged the cloister into darkness. The candles flickered out, leaving only the faint glow of the moon through the mist. A whisper brushed his ear, "Leave the dead in peace." So close it sent a chill down his spine. He spun, but saw only shadows, the rustle of leaves in the wind. When the lights returned, Poirot hurried to the crypt, drawn by an instinct honed by years of unraveling mysteries. There he found the reliquary ajar, its lock forced open, its contents gone, the golden chest, once a symbol of sanctity, warning. He sifted through the abbot's ledges, finding entries of dwindling donations, the cloister teetering on financial ruin. A coded note mentioned the child's inheritance, linking back to Agnes's tale. Was it a fabrication, or the key to the motive? As the bell tolled midnight, its mournful note echoed through the stones. Poirot stood at the scriptorium's window, gazing into the fog when a creak in the corridor made him pause. He opened the door, peering into the darkness, but saw only the flicker of a distant candle. Yet the air carried a whisper, faint and chilling. The truth is buried. Was it the wind, or a warning from the killer? Poirot's gray cells whirred, arranging the facts. The reliquary's theft, Simon's murder, the cyanide's source. The web was tightening, but the spider remained hidden. Back in his guest cell, Poirot lit a candle, its flame casting shadows that danced like specters. He reviewed his notes, the clues aligning like stars in a constellation. The abbot's death was a calculated act, the poison delivered with precision. Lucian's ambition, Elias's access, Agnes's secrets, all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than greed. The reliquary's empty chest suggested a truth worth killing for. But whose truth? As he pondered, a thud echoed from the garden below, followed by silence. Poirot's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the thrill of the chase. The game was afoot, and the next move would bring him closer to the killer or
to danger itself. The storm raged over St. Paul's Cloister like the wrath of an ancient god, rain lashing against the leaded windows of the refectory in relentless sheets, echoing off the Norman stones that had stood sentinel for centuries, as if the very foundations of the cloister trembled with the secrets it harbored. It was the 4th day of Hercule Poirot's investigation in October 1935, and the air inside was thick with tension, the scent of damp wool and flickering candle wax mingling with the brethren's unspoken fears. The murders of Abbot Gregory Hawthorne by cyanide and his notebook ready. The reliquary's theft the previous night had escalated the mystery, the golden chest empty, its contents vanished into the storm. The storm's fury seemed to mirror the turmoil within. Poirot began with Brother Simon's death, dismissing the suicide note as a forgery. "The knot in the rope," he explained. "It was a military hitch, precise and strong, too expert for a man in despair." He paced, his cane tapping rhythmically on the flagstones. Simon was murdered to silence him, for he had witnessed something damning. Clues pointed to Father Lucien, whose background included a brief stint in the territorial army before taking vows. "You, Monsieur Lucien, argued with the abbot over embezzled funds from cloister donations," Poirot accused, producing a ledger from his pocket. Entries showed discrepancies, sums siphoned for personal gain, witnessed by Simon during a late-night confrontation. Lucien blanched, thunder cracking overhead as if in punctuation. I borrowed, yes," he stammered, "to fund scholarly pursuits. The abbot discovered it, threatened exposure. But I did not kill him." His motive deepened, not just ambition for the abbotcy, but fear of ruin. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And Simon? He knew of your thefts, n'est-ce pas? You silenced him with the same cunning used on the abbot. The cyanide and the tobacco, the staged hanging. Lucien's access to both scenes made him suspect. Red herrings began to dissolve like mist in the rain. The ghostly apparition, sighted in the garden, was revealed as a diversion, a white-robed figure created by a monk's alb draped over a scarecrow-like frame, planted to foster superstition and distract from the real crimes. "Superstition is the killer's ally," Poirot said, "but logic is mine." The footprint in the mud, matching Elias's boots, was another false trail. Boots stolen and worn by the murderer to implicate the archivist. Sister Agnes's secrets unraveled next. In the flickering candlelight, her face crumpled as Poirot confronted her with the abbot's diary, hidden in the infirmary. "You spoke of an illegitimate
Proving the cloister's land was acquired through forgery in the 12th century, stolen from a noble family, a secret that could lead to dissolution by the church. The abbot had guarded this to preserve the order, even embezzling with Lucien's help unwittingly. The fatal secret, Poirot declared, was this land's tainted history. Exposure would end St. Paul's. Brother Elias, as archivist, had known fragments of this history. His attack was self-inflicted, Poirot deduced, the gash superficial, the torn page a prop to feign victimhood. "You sought to protect the cloister's legacy," Poirot said, "but at what cost?" Elias's eyes widened, thunder booming. I discovered the documents," he whispered. "The abbot planned to confess, to return the land. It would destroy us." His fanaticism shone through, preservation of the order above all, even murder. Evidence mounted progressively. The cyanide traces on the rosary bead led back to Elias, who crafted them near the infirmary. The reliquary's theft? A ruse by Elias to retrieve the documents before Poirot could. As lightning flashed, illuminating the refectory's arched windows, Poirot pieced the method. The poison in the envelope's glue, licked by the abbot. Simon killed with the rope to frame Lucien. But the footprints, the ghost, They were your diversions, Monsieur Elias. The atmosphere thickened, rain pounding like accusations. Prior Thomas shifted uneasily, but Poirot's focus remained on the core suspects. Agnes's child story was a lie, born of panic. Lucian's embezzlement a side crime, not the murder. Elias's motive burned brightest, zealotry for the Cloister's survival. As thunder cracked, a scuffle erupted in the garden, muffled cries amid the downpour. Poirot and Japp rushed out, rain soaking their clothes, lanterns swinging wildly. In the muddied herb beds, they found Elias fleeing, a satchel clutched to his chest, papers spilling into the puddles. "It's not what you think," he shouted, slipping on the wet stones. Japp tackled him, the satchel bursting open to reveal the reliquary's documents, sodden but intact, proofs of the land's theft. Elias faded, leaving only the drip of water and the weight of truth. Chapter 8. The Web Unravels. The refectory's fire crackled warmly, casting dancing shadows across the vaulted ceiling of St. Paul's Cloister, a fragile bulwark against the lingering chill of the storm that had raged earlier. Rain still dripped from the eaves outside, pattering like hesitant footsteps on the stone paths, as the remnants of thunder grumbled in the distance. It was the culmination of the 4th day of Hercule Poirot's investigation in October 1935, and the air was thick with the scent of burning oak and the brethren's collective anxiety. The cloister, with its ancient Norman walls and whispering corridors, had become a stage for revelation, its sanctity stained by murder and deceit. Abbot Gregory Hawthorne's poisoning, Brother Simon's hanging, and the theft of the reliquary's documents had woven a web of intrigue. And now Poirot stood at its center, his figure impeccable despite the damp, ready to pull the threads taut. The suspects were assembled once more. Father Lucien, his ambition laid bare. Sister Agnes, her secrets spilling like tears. Brother Elias, muddied and cuffed from his flight in the garden, his fanatic eyes defiant. And Prior Thomas, silent observer. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his face grim, as Poirot paced before the fire, his cane tapping a rhythmic cadence. "Mes amis," he began, his voice resonant in the hush. "The web unravels now. The little grey cells have arranged the chaos into order. Observe, listen, and the truth shall emerge from the shadows." Poirot's gaze fixed on Elias first, the satchel of sodden documents at his feet like damning evidence. "You, Monsieur Elias, are the spider at the heart. But let us trace the silk, thread by thread." He produced the cyanide vial from his pocket, encased in glass. The poison came from the infirmary, yes, but laced into the glue of a forged letter from the solicitor. A letter you crafted, knowing the abbot's habit of licking seals during correspondence. Elias's face twisted, but Poirot trembling hands. Poirot turned to her with compassion. "And you, mademoiselle, your secrets added layers to the deception. The tale of the illegitimate child, it was a thriller of your own invention, born from the abbot's confessions of his youthful sins. He spoke to you of a lost love, a child perhaps, but it was his burden, not yours. You forged prescriptions to ease his heart, but in panic wove this lie to divert us." Agnes wept softly, the firelight glinting on her tears. "I feared scandal," she whispered. "My own past affair, he knew, promised silence. When the letter came, I thought it exposed us both." Her psychological torment was palpable. Nights of sleepless vigil, hands shaking not from guilt of killing, but from the thriller-like dread of exposure. The cyanide in the infirmary was hers to access, but her resolve too frail for poison. Red herrings cleared like fog in the morning sun. The ghost in the garden, a white alb on a pole, rigged by Elias to foster fear and superstition, drawing eyes away from his deeds. The rosary bead with poisoned traces, planted in the scriptorium to implicate himself falsely, bolstering his victim status after the self-inflicted attack. "You staged your assault, Monsieur Elias," Poirot declared. "The gash shallow, the torn page a prop from the library's medieval tome. It spoke of the curse to distract, but the true curse was your fanaticism." Evidence mounted in Poirot's exposition, each piece slotting into place with logical precision. The half-burned letter in the grate, Elias's work, charred to leave tantalizing fragments. Your shame, payment, echoing the abbot's real past but fabricated to suggest external blackmail. The reliquaries theft, Elias's desperate retrieval of the documents proving the land's forgery, hidden there by the abbot to protect the cloister. "You discovered his plan to confess," Poirot said, "to return the land and atone. It would dissolve the order, your life's work. So you martyred him, poisoning to silence, then killed Simon, who overheard your arguments." Brother Simon's murder peeled back like an onion's layer. As Poirot accused, Elias lunged, his cuffed hands grasping for the documents. "The order must endure," he snarled, fanatic zeal blazing. Japp restrained him, but in the scuffle, Agnes rose with a gasp, producing a hidden diary from her habit. The abbot's personal journal, concealed in the infirmary. "Wait, there's more!" she cried, her voice piercing the chaos. The room fell silent, the fire's crackle the only sound, as Poirot took the diary, its leather cover worn. Pages fluttered open to entries of doubt, confession, and a final note. "Elias knows too much. If I reveal, he will stop me." The revelation hung in the air, tension palpable, the web not fully unraveled, promising a deeper twist in the unraveling dawn. Poirot's eyes gleamed, thunder rumbling faintly outside. "Ah, mademoiselle, this changes the silhouette. The abbot suspected, but the killer's mask slips further." Elias laughed maniacally, but the diary's words implicated an accomplice, perhaps Agnes herself, or Lucien's greed entwined. The psychological layers deepened. Elias's isolation in the scriptorium, nights poring over secrets, Agnes's torment in the infirmary, Vile's whispering temptation, Lucien's ambition in the chapter house, plotting ascendance. The storm had passed, but the refectory felt charged, rain dripping from gutters like unresolved questions. Poirot pored over the diary by firelight, entries revealing the abbot's meetings, a clandestine rendezvous with Elias, threats veiled in prayer. "The sequence," Poirot murmured. "The poison administered during Vespers, the tobacco tainted as backup. Simon saw the tempering, sealed his fate. Red herrings fully dissolved. The chalice trace a spill from Elias's sleeve. The footprint, a deliberate plant. Yet the diary's final page held a cipher, unsolved, hinting at a betrayal beyond Elias. As Japp hauled him away, Elias spat. "The secret buries us all!" Agnes collapsed, sobbing, her interruption a cry from the soul. Lucien stared into the fire, ambition shattered. The cloister's bells tolled midnight, their note mournful, as Poirot pondered the new clue. The web unraveled. Late hour, his mustache a perfect curve, framing a face alight with the clarity of revelation. The fire in the nearby hearth cast long shadows, dancing across the faces of Father Lucian, Sister Agnes, and Prior Thomas, while Brother Elias, cuffed and defiant, sat under Inspector Japp's watchful eye. The murders of Abbot Gregory Hawthorne and Brother Simon, coupled with the theft of the reliquary's documents, had led to this moment, a tapestry of deceit now laid bare by Poirot's relentless grey cells. The abbot's hidden diary, produced by Agnes, lay open in his hands, its final pages a cipher of truth that promised to unmask the killer. Poirot's voice sliced through the hush like a blade, calm,
yet commanding. Mes amis, the hour of deduction has come. The little gray cells, they have unraveled the web, and the truth, it stands revealed. He held up the diary, its leather cover worn by years of secrets. This book, it is the key not to the reliquary, but to the heart of the crime. Let us walk the path of logic together. The diary's entries detailed the abbot's torment, his youthful sins as Gregory Hawthorne, Esquire, a lost inheritance, a jilted lover, a duel, followed by his retreat to the cloister to atone. But the true secret was darker. The reliquary contained not a sacred relic, but documents proving the cloister's land was stolen in the 12th century, forged titles that could dissolve the order if exposed. The abbot planned to confess, Poirot said, to return the land and seek absolution. But this, it threatened the cloister's existence, and someone's very soul. Brother Elias, the archivist, was the linchpin. His fanatic devotion to the order, born of years in the scriptorium's solitude, drove him to murder. You, Monsieur Elias, Poirot declared, discovered the abbot's plan to reveal the forgery. You poisoned him to martyr him, to preserve the cloister's lie. The cyanide, traced to the infirmary, was administered via the glue of a forged letter, licked by the abbot during his evening correspondence. Elias's access to the scriptorium allowed him to plant the letter, its fragment.
Your argument with the abbot, Poirot continued, about the forged documents and your complicity in wartime smuggling, relics sold to fund the cloister. Simon, denied absolution for his wartime sins, confronted Elias, sealing his fate. The hanging in the bell tower, staged as suicide, bore Elias's mark, a sailor's hitch knot, learned in his youth, not a military tie as suspected of Lucien. The note, "The secret dies with me," was forged, written under duress before Simon was hoisted. You silenced him to protect the lie, Poirot accused, and to frame Father Lucien, whose embezzlement you exploited. Lucien shifted uncomfortably, his ambition exposed but his guilt limited to theft. I took funds, he admitted, his voice tight, to buy relics for study. The abbot discovered it, threatened exposure, but I swear I did not kill. Poirot nodded. Your crime is greed, mon ami, but not murder. The tea you tampered with was a red herring, planted by Elias to divert suspicion. The ledger of discrepancies shown earlier confirmed Lucien's thefts, but his alibi, prayer in the chapel though unwitnessed, held against murder. Sister Agnes's role unraveled next. Her tale of an illegitimate child was a fabrication, born of panic to shield her own secret. An affair before her vows, confessed to the abbot, who promised silence. You feared the blackmail letter exposed you both, Poirot said gently. But it was Elias's forgery, designed to mislead. Agnes's tears flowed, her psychological torment evident in trembling hands and sleepless eyes. She had forged prescriptions to calm the abbot's heart, but lacked the resolve for poison. I only wanted to protect him, she whispered, her rosary clicking like a metronome of guilt. The logical process was meticulous, timelines aligned, Elias alone in the scriptorium post-vespers, planting the poisoned letter, the cyanide mixed into the abbot's pipe tobacco as a backup, inhaled during meditation. Simon's confrontation occurred later, his murder swift to silence his knowledge. The reliquary's theft was Elias's final act, retrieving the documents before Poirot could uncover them. You fled in the storm, Poirot said, but the truth, it does not run.
Raised a hand, his calm unshaken. Mademoiselle, he said softly, the weapon, it is not real, n'est-ce pas? Agnes's hand trembled, the pistol revealed as a candlestick, clutched in a moment of panic. She collapsed, sobbing, as Jap secured her. The outburst unveiled the final twist. Agnes, though not the killer, was complicit. The diary's cipher, decoded by Poirot, revealed her role. She had known of Elias's plan, her silence bought by fear of her own scandal. "You aided him, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "Not with poison, but with secrecy, guarding the lie to save the cloister." Agnes's confession spilled forth. "I thought it was God's will, to protect our home." The web was fully unraveled. Elias, the mastermind, killed to preserve the cloister's forged legacy, using cyanide from the infirmary, planting false clues to frame Lucian and Agnes. Simon's murder was a desperate act to silence a witness. The reliquary's documents, now recovered, would be turned over to the church, the cloister's fate uncertain. "The truth," Poirot declared, "it is a bitter absolution, but necessary." As Japp prepared to lead Elias away, the archivist's laughter rang out, chilling and unrepentant. "The order endures in me," he proclaimed. But the brethren turned away, their faith shaken. The chapter house fell silent, the fire's embers dying, as Poirot stood resolute. The mystery was solved, but the cost weighed heavily, a cloister fractured, secrets laid bare. Outside, the mist curled around the spires, whispering of sins revealed, as the final act loomed in the dawn. Chapter 10. Resolution in the Dawn. The dawn broke over St. Paul's cloister with a tentative light, piercing the mist that had cloaked the ancient stones for days. The air was crisp, scented with wet earth, and the faint tang of incense that lingered like a prayer in the Norman halls. It was the 5th day of Hercule Poirot's investigation in October 1935, and collapsing into a chair, her habit crumpled around her. "I knew Elias's plan, and I said nothing. I thought it was God's will to save our home." Her complicity, born of fear for her own scandal, an affair before her vows, had bound her to Elias's fanatic scheme. Poirot's grey cells had pieced together the final threads, and now, as the first rays of sunlight gilded the spires, he prepared to deliver the resolution that would close the case. The chapter house, with its vaulted ceiling and flickering sconces, had been the stage for Poirot's final deduction. Brother Elias, the archivist, was the mastermind, his devotion to the cloister's legacy twisted into murder. The abbot's diary, produced by Agnes, had confirmed his plan. Cyanide in the glue of a forged letter, planted in the scriptorium to silence the abbot's intent to confess the cloister's founding sin. Land stolen through forged titles in the 12th century. Brother Simon, who overheard Elias's arguments with the abbot, was hanged in the bell tower, his death staged as suicide with a forged note. "The secret dies with me." Agnes, though not the killer, had been complicit, her silence bought by fear of exposure. Poirot paced the garden now, his cane sinking into the soft earth, as Japp oversaw Elias's arrest inside. The reliquary's documents, recovered from Elias's satchel, lay on a refectory table, their sodden pages proof of the cloister's tainted origins. The golden chest, once believed to hold a fragment of the true cross, had been a lie, a repository for papers that could dissolve the order if revealed to the church. Elias had killed to preserve this secret, martyring the abbot to prevent his confession, and silencing Simon to protect the conspiracy. "The truth," Poirot murmured, gazing at the mist curling around the rose bushes. "It is a bitter medicine, but it heals." The brethren, shaken by the revelations, had dispersed to their cells, their faith tested by the sins laid bare. Father Lucian, cleared of murder but guilty of embezzling cloister funds, sat in the refectory, his ambition shattered. with cyanide traces to bolster Elias's false victimhood, but her guilt weighed heavy. Poirot, with his characteristic compassion, had placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mademoiselle, the truth redeems, even if it pains." She would face the Church's judgment, not the gallows, her penance a life of atonement. The method of the murders was a masterpiece of cunning, as Poirot had explained to Japp. The cyanide, stolen from the infirmary, was mixed into the glue of a forged letter, its acrid scent masked by the abbot's pipe tobacco, a secondary delivery inhaled during meditation. Elias, with his archivist's access, had slipped the letter among the abbot's papers post-vespers, knowing his habit of sealing replies. The half-burned fragments in the grate, "Your shame, payment," were Elias's creation, mimicking blackmail to obscure his motive. Simon's death was swifter, a confrontation in the bell tower, a struggle, and a sailor's hitch knot from Elias's youth, not Lucian's military training. The note was forged, Simon's hand forced, before his end. Red herrings had littered the path. The ghostly figure in the garden, a white alb rigged by Elias to sow fear. The footprint in the mud, boots stolen to implicate Lucian. The rosary bead, planted to suggest Elias's innocence. The attack on Elias himself, self-inflicted, the gash shallow, was a final ruse to divert suspicion. "The killer," Poirot had told Japp. "He is a playwright, staging a drama of deception. But the script, it has flaws the gray cells detect." The resolution was satisfying, if somber. Elias, his fanaticism unrepentant, was led away by Japp, his laughter echoing through the cloister as he proclaimed, "The order endures!" The documents, now in the hands of the authorities, would be reviewed by the Church, the cloister's future uncertain. Prior Thomas, silent through much of the ordeal, murmured a prayer for guidance, his gaunt face etched with grief. "We are humbled," he said, "but perhaps purified." The brethren would rebuild, their faith tested. The cloister's whispers would linger, a reminder of sins revealed and truths redeemed. As Poirot prepared to depart, his taxi waiting at the gates, he paused at the scriptorium's threshold. The open manuscript, its Latin text still glowing, "Et umbrae peccatorum revelabuntur," seemed a final farewell. "The shadows of sinners are revealed," he murmured, "and the light, it prevails." With a nod to Japp, he stepped into the taxi, the cloister fading into the mist behind him. The case was closed, but the mystery of the human heart, Poirot knew, would forever elude even his grey cells.